Hey team, welcome back to another really incredible conversation here on the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and I have got really one of our first repeat guests on the show, back by popular demand. He was in our first 10 episodes, maybe the first 5 episodes way back in the beginning in 2024 when we first launched this thing. He's coming to us from down in Georgia. His name is Michael Pisciotta, and he is world renowned in the world of agronomy and all things leadership. So, Michael, welcome back to the show, man.
Mark, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm excited for us to dive into this conversation and see how different it is for me and for you to rehash these things than
Mm-hmm.
when we started, man. It's been exciting. You've had a bunch of episodes. How many episodes have you had between when we first talked?
I you're this is probably somewhere around interview 225.
Wow.
So something in that ballpark. About 225, I think, since we started this. We started thinking about doing this 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. Started plotting, planning, the right people. Zach Bingman from Ag Explorer, he came in and he helped out. He helped us book our first. I think that's how we got to know each other, is through Zach. And so, we give him a lot of credit in helping us get this thing off the ground in the early days. But in the early days, man, we did like 3 episodes a week. We were dropping them on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 90 days for the first quarter. And then after that, we went down to about 2 episodes for the next year. Then we started dropping one on Mondays, and we're going to keep it right there. That's a nice steady pace. I don't think anybody needs to hear me more than that talking about intentional leadership in the ag industry, but the interviews keep getting better, the knowledge keeps getting better, and the audience keeps growing.
Incredible, Mark.
So it's
So
good,
good.
man.
Well,
Yeah,
congratulations
brother.
on
All right, talk. Yeah, well, thank you. And you've got some updates too, but let's get to it. You get the same opening question everybody does. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
I do remember last time I was here, I said intention starts with the heart. And I'm gonna I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
double down and expand a little bit on that because I've had a new phrase come into my life called heart posture. Now I'd never heard that before. And what it means is, how are you gonna project what you feel inside when something happens? How are you gonna respond to that? And that is intentional.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about your heart posture. You have to be aware where you want to go. You have to set that tone and intentionality from your brain and internalize it down to your heart. And so it's not just about, hey, I know I need to be reaching out to this person. I know I have a humongous quarterly financial projection sheet that I have to turn in to my boss today. I know those things, but why am I going to do them? Why, even if I know what's going to
Mm-hmm.
direct me, and what's going to direct me is my heart posture on this. And so I do want to say that because I think intention's more than just a mindset. It's a heart set.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I love it. I love that. And as you're talking through it, I have to. I mean, we got to break this down just a little bit. So if you think about it from this perspective, if I have to get this thing to my boss, but I'm resentful about it because I think it's annoying. we're we are just talking CRM, right? But off the mic. And if I'm even though that information that gets entered in the CRM is super valuable to my company and it helps my leadership make better decisions because they can make projections, and if it's accurate data, then they can actually help put me in a better position. But I'm annoyed because I'm busy today, right? That's what you're talking about. So my heart posture is one of annoyance. It's one of resentment. It's one of I'm busy. And by the way, like when you don't want to be sitting down next to me or getting on a coaching call with me, and when I ask you like, hey, how's it going? And you say, "Ugh, I'm busy. I like don't like that is one of the least intentional things you can say about yourself, and I'm going to correct you. Right? I'm going to correct you. We're going to have a different conversation on the backside of that. But heart posture. I love it. It has a lot to do with it. And that's something, what I like about that is that it gives me something that I can actually work on. I can notice what my heart posture is
Yeah, and
and
you
then
know,
decide if that's useful or intentional.
well, and I wanna just kind of say too, you know, when we can get into my my career right now where we are with things, but you might encounter a lot of new types of people that you might not have been. Maybe you've been in a
Hmm.
group for a long time and you've had the same group of coworkers for a long time. You know what's coming from them. But if you're with people that you have
Hmm.
not had a lot of exposure with, you know, you might not be able to do the same sort of response. And what I mean by that is you need to have some grace. You need to have some grace for maybe who those are or
Mm.
how those folks are going to interact with you. They might have well intentions. We have to kind of assess that and discern that every time that we have an interaction. But we need to have some grace, and that only can come from
Hmm.
your heart because you might be really annoyed with having to do this quote unquote busy work. But if you're not going to have some grace about what folks are at, maybe they're just doing their job, or maybe they've been sent there for a specific person by a specific person, and they're going to say whether you're nice or you're not nice. And that's going to direct a whole flow of a deal.
Mm.
So having that level of grace
Hmm.
that pairs with intention, I think is really needed in agriculture right now.
I think it's needed just about everywhere, including at home. I'm thinking about a conversation I had this morning that wasn't super nice that requires some grace right now. God maybe sent you on this podcast just to tell me that message right off the bat. It's good. It's good. All right, what are you up to these days? You if we go back 2 years ago into the first 10 episodes, we're now in the 220s as we produce this one. But you were in the first 10 episodes. You were with T-Mac Agro. You moved on from there a little over a year ago, year and a half ago. Went on your own.
I did.
So now
I
what?
did. I did. And that was pretty unknown. It was, some people might say it was pretty scary. It might be a risk. A lot of people might say, well, that was a pretty big risk you took. But I only take risks that are calculated, Mark. I kind of staked a lot of my career on these. I try to understand what the potential outcomes could be. But really, I hedged my bet, so to speak, on have I done a good job for myself, how people view me, are other companies or potential clients, are they going to want to interact with me? Have I built trust with people? So it was an internal conversation. So if I wouldn't have been able to answer those questions, I would not have jumped out there by myself. And so you might have a lot of guests that might be thinking about that, my listeners that might be thinking about that. And I have more questions that we could ask them on that kind of decision matrix, but those are things that I knew that I could answer for myself. So it really de-risked that move to start my own consulting firm. And so I founded Poma Ag Group to help biological manufacturers, to help ag tech startups, advise them, help them understand the market, pathways to commercialization. you know, I do have a background in regulatory and product development and marketing. So I've just been really blessed to have a lot of different touch points on things. And so maybe not be the biggest expert, but just have a little exposure and get access to other people that are experts. And so one of my mantras at Poma Ag Group was I never take a contract by myself. Some consultants may really frown on that, but it has served me well because I've got to pick and choose people that I want to share contracts with, and they're people that I think are very different than me a lot of times, but we have a synergistic
Mm.
relationship. Maybe they're really strong in one area and I'm strong in another, and we can drive
Hmm.
these clients to a higher level together than we can by ourselves. And so that's one of the Poma kind of principles that I have. In the past two
I
months,
love it.
one of my primary clients wanted me to become an executive and kind of guide strategy and commercialization for them. Their name's Chonex. They're a biological
Hmm.
input manufacturer, very unique, very specialized. A lot of things to unpack with them, but a lot of potential. So once again, I didn't mind saying no to some other folks to focus more on Chonex, because to me that was a risk with a high reward. And I do believe they have a product category that's very new, and I'm very excited about it and excited to work and get my hands dirty on around that.
Come on, let's go. Let's go. Well, I love what you're saying about partnering up. I'm glad that you've made that a principle of yours. Like it says in the good book, one can put 1,000 to flight, but two can put 10,000 to flight. So when you get partnered up with the right person, the right entities, really, really incredible things can happen. Walk us through just a little bit, man. As you were thinking about going out on your own, I think a lot of people maybe dream about becoming a consultant. It's one thing about, you know, knowing that you want to go do it, but then actually pulling the trigger and then being out there. I liken it often to jumping off the cliff and then having to build the airplane while you're on your way down, right? That has been my experience. I'm 15 years into it. And honestly, I still am building the airplane half the time and like ripping out the cockpit and putting in a new one and upgrading the wings sometimes, I mean, it's a constant evolution as a business owner, especially a small business owner, where you don't have a lot of, what people I think would perceive as safety and security from the outside world. But now you've got a different level of freedom. So what's been one of the biggest challenges in the journey of being on your own?
Yeah, probably there's different levels of internal motivation, and you have to manage yourself well. You have to not put too much on being able to do everything yourself. And you're by yourself. And so you're saying, well, Michael, why would you say I can't do everything yourself? Well, you really have to guard your heart and your mind, because it's a trap. If you think you can do everything, it's a trap. Like, that's just a trap. And so one thing I would say first is I didn't know my own limits, and it's forced me to be in prayer
Mm-hmm.
about that. It's forced me to find and teeter on that edge. And even if I know I'm supposed to be serving a client, I absolutely have to really be, putting my faith in something beyond my own ability, because I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to be serving. I know I'm supposed to be showing up, just like I have, a full fledged employer that I'm full time serving. But I have to find that
Mm-hmm.
purpose and that intention, that sometimes it teeters that ledge of, maybe I don't have the 100% confidence on this. They've hired me to do a really
Mm-hmm.
special job. I've been delivering for them, or I've delivered up my contract and I'm about to re up, and they've asked me to do something greater. And so I think there's challenges along the way. I would say the first challenge is kind of knowing your limits. The second challenge is, how do you take on that second contract? You've delivered for them for a month or 3 months. They've asked you for 6 months. You need to make it worth your while.
Yeah.
And finding your own value, that's another challenge. You cannot approach being a consultant with the favor mentality. Oh, let me do you a favor. You have to approach it with, I have self value and self worth. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that honestly had been beaten out of me by corporate jobs. Mark, I'll be very honest with you. Some of
Mm-hmm.
this, you know, you can become defensive in certain ways. I had already de uh, de-escalated that part of my body. Like, I'm not so defensive. Let them in, bring buy-in in. But the next part of that is your mentality and your self-worth. A lot of times, you're kind of used to going with the flow chart of where you are in the hierarchy, and potentially getting beaten down
Mm-hmm.
depending on what you got to do. Man, I'll call out ag retail
Yeah.
right now. Ag retail is thankless, and a lot of the men and women
Mm-hmm.
in ag retail, they sacrifice a lot. And so my heart goes out to them, and I hope The people they serve and the people that are above them, managing them, loving on them, they realize what that self worth and self value is, and they build that back in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's dissect that a little bit. So what do you mean by self worth and self value and having it beat out of you?
Yeah, I would I would say this generally falls into something I've been very guilty of because once again, Mark, I don't have an original idea. I only have experiences that have influenced me a lot.
Mhm.
And so one thing is you become, I was a technical support agronomist, and a part of my value was put on my ability to serve farmers and other salespeople. That became my identity. That's not healthy because if you suck at your job or you do not deliver, then you have low worth by the property of saying, my identity is my opportunity. And it can't be that
Mm.
because, man, listen, if you're in ag retail and you've been hired to be an elite salesperson, but you still got to go drive a spreader truck every other week because you're short on labor and your truck breaks down, then your identity breaks down. Like, that's not good. So
Mm.
to be able to separate your own value and worth away from your career is essential, and it borders on mental health conversations. It borders on spiritual conversations. I won't even say it borders. It is squarely in head and heart and soul capacities, this conversation. So
Yeah.
being able to fill those out, to understand there's a difference, and to start growing your identity beyond that. I mean, intentionally growing your
Mm.
identity beyond that. It is absolutely critical in today's society, especially critical in agriculture.
So, there's something, this is a good place to just to say the work that we do at the Momentum Company as it pertains to what you just said is a lot of identity work. It's a lot of identity work. And most people are going to listen to this and be like, what identity work? What does that mean? Like, well, it's what you just said, man. Like, if your identity is what you do, if your identity is given to you from those people around you, be it your boss or your spouse or your kids, um, you're in for a heartache at some point. Something's going to break. A conversation's not going to go well. So, the conversation around identity actually boils down to like who are you, and like where does your value truly come from? And for me, that was, in my spiritual walk, it was really important that I get there at one point and find out where does my value actually come from. And when I realized like my value like actually comes from the creator of the universe and not from what Debbie in accounting thinks of me or what my dad even thought about me, man, like it was like I became a whole brand new person. you
Yeah.
know, and I'll come across people all the time like, man, how do you put yourself out there like this? Mark Jewell's not afraid to put himself out there. You put yourself out there. We post selfies on LinkedIn. We post information about our relationship on LinkedIn. That's who we are, right? From like that's what we're about. Like we're about helping people having upgraded identities. Why? Because we've come to understand that when you upgrade your identity and you get in touch with where your identity and your value actually comes from and who you really are, not who you think you are, not what you went to school to be, right? Then all of a sudden, the whole world opens up to you in a whole great big different way. And like if you as an employer, and I'm speaking to the employers who are listening to this right now, when you get that and you create an environment, you curate an environment within which the people who work for you, their identity comes from something other than your approval, something higher than you, all of a sudden, man, things open up. People show up in a whole great big different way.
Yeah.
You can still hold people accountable. You still have to have rules. Still have to have boundaries, things that we do and don't do, and the job has to get done. But when people show up to do that job in an identity that's something bigger than the job gets done better.
Man.
That's like That is one of the most intentional things that you can intentionally do, is to curate that environment within which your people truly can thrive. That is our mission at the Momentum Company.
Mm, Mark, I just
And I
can't.
think about
I,
it in everything I do. Yeah, go ahead. Our connection's a little off. Yep.
no, I just can't leave this conversation. I can't leave it because what you said is super profound. Because people in our space in agriculture, they need to be growing that. You need to be growing that because there's always things in your past. There's always things that are going to tie you down, hold you down. And this extends to personal things. You mentioned that. I'm very thankful you mentioned that because if you really want to be free, you have to grow this part of you and run in a certain direction. You have to run in a certain direction because you running in a
Mm,
certain direction, you can forget and erase those things that are pulling you down, past jobs, past seasons, past relationships, past things you've done that you might be ashamed of. You got to run away from that, but there's so much grace to be gained when you run in that direction, just like you said. There's grace to be gained. And on the other side, what you're building at the Momentum Company is so important because when you have people that are truly free to be who they are and know their identity and to contribute, there is absolutely no doubt you get the most out of those people. You get more than what those people are. And so I want to commend you for that at the
mm,
Momentum Company because there needs to be more of that in this world for sure.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually caused us to shift our direction a lot. We've historically sold team projects where we go in and we just work with the team, and we still do that. That's the biggest component of our revenue. But we did change our go to market quite a bit. Where in most cases we're actually starting with an executive now. And what's interesting is we're very seldom working with the executive on a business function. It's almost always about his personal health, physical health, mental health, relational health, and it's usually his relationship. Not that we only work with men; we do work with quite a few women, but a lot of times it's a CEO, and we're a male dominated industry, so it just tends to, obviously the majority tend to be in that camp. And yeah, it's almost always something there. He's feeling guilty about the success at work, and the marriage has become the collateral damage to his success. So we go to work on that. We go to work with that guy on that thing, and then once we help him get that part of his life straightened out, he restores his connection with himself. He restores his connection with his creator. He restores his connection with his spouse. Now we can go to work on the business. Because here's what's interesting: 100% of the time, after about 36 months, could be sooner, it could be later, but on average, after 36 months, your organization is a direct reflection of your CEO always.
Hmm.
If not,
Mm,
then you have a weak leader.
mm. Wow.
So, and then I could just say also, even if they're a weak leader, that organization will become a reflection of them if they last 36 months. So, but within 3 years time frame, this has been my observation. There's plenty of research to back this up, by the way, in the world of organizational design, development, executive leadership, etc. Your organization becomes a direct reflection of you within about 3 years of you taking the helm. And I could also we can drip that down. If you're the vice president of sales or the VP of agronomy or the VP of feed or whatever your role is, your division, your business unit will also become a direct reflection of you. You're obviously going to be impacted by the culture brought about by your board and your CEO. But this is why, in ag retail, why do we have the culture that we have that is thankless? Okay. Well, I'll just say, in part, you allow farmers to be on your board who don't buy your stuff.
Mm,
This happens all the time. I mean, I'm not saying
mhm.
everybody, but there are farmers who are on boards of a co-op who don't buy product, and then they buy product from a competitor.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you have to buy all of your stuff in one place. Like everybody should probably diversify their risk just a little bit. But good golly, Miss Molly, like what are you doing? Like what kind of culture are we allowing inside of a company where even our board of directors is not loyal? What do you expect? They're thankless. Guess what? That trickles in, man. That trickles in. That impacts the CEO. He impacts or she impacts everybody else in the organization. It can't not work that way. It's literally God's design for how he built this whole thing to work. And so, um, yeah, it's interesting to see like just how important that is. So when, to bring it back to our conversation, right? This is the Intentional Leader podcast, right? So what's your heart posture as the leader of your company on a board of directors, as the VP of whatever you are, the regional manager, right? Or even the I have salespeople that have 150 farmer customers in our coaching programs. You're a whole organizational leader just doing that, right? So what's your heart posture as you go about doing all of these things, right? And it matters. It matters a lot. That's good. I'm glad you brought that up at the beginning, man, because I don't think many of us will have an opportunity to sit and just listen and think about that. And it's like, yeah, what's my posture? What's my intention? Right? If it's intentional, it means what it means is that you are deliberately doing it.
All right, Mark, that was a great podcast. Now we can just, we can talk about whatever.
Yeah. Now we just well, okay. So let's take that. Actually, let's pivot a little bit. Now we got the deep, heavy stuff, right? Let's talk about how this plays in because how you determine heart posture, what your intention is, what it is that you are truly actually up to, I think plays into what's coming up in the future of our industry, the future of our world. I think it would be remiss to say or to not talk about the fact that things are changing. AI is invading the workspace. Technology, ag tech is invading the workspace. There's lots of startups. There's lots of biologicals. We've got uh, all kinds of volatility in the market due to tariffs and trade issues and the Strait of Hormuz. As we record this, we have no idea where that's going to be. We're doing this on May 7th. This probably comes out in a month. Maybe we'll have some resolution to that by then. I don't know. I can't imagine that Trump lets this go beyond the 4th of July holiday. He's got to get gas prices down so people can go to all their holiday um, celebrations. We got to celebrate 250 years, and that's going to be a banger. So my prediction is that we've got this solved. But there's a lot going on, man. There's a lot going on. What of all the things going on right now gets the lion's share of your attention, Michael? And let's start with that.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to say that there's different forces at work. And what I mean by that is that they really start around what is the intention? What is the intention? Because in my opinion, what is going to win out is the intention of serving American farmers. The intentionality and where does that come
Mm-hmm.
from? Because it's not necessarily just, okay, we're going to solve this problem or we're going to have this product or we're going to build this portfolio. It's really around, okay, how are we going to help our farmers sustain this period of traumatic environmental, we've had just the worst drought in 100 years in the Southeast. As
Mm-hmm.
of May 1st, 94% of between Louisiana and Virginia was in a drought. 94%, which means no germination, no
Wow.
planting. If you don't have irrigation, you're smoked. Even if you do have irrigation, you don't have to you got to keep your pivots running. So this is just traumatic,
Yeah.
not a good financial plan, not a good economic financial proposal for sure. And so
Yeah.
the
No
folks
kidding.
that yeah, the folks that really have this intention of saying, I'm going to serve farmers, I'm going to be lean about this, I'm willing to maybe look beyond economics and look into, what's going to get me through. Maybe I don't have to go out and
Mm-hmm.
be, you know, 20% year over year sales growth. Maybe I need to focus on the quality of what I bring to my growers that I had last year, make sure that they're taken care of,
Mhm.
let their neighbors see what I'm doing.
Yep.
And then from that, I will get growth. I will have growth. But the intention, especially, I want to mention
Hmm.
this, been so much money invested in ag tech solutions, biological solutions, and this money is not created equal. Even though it's got numbers on it, it's got checks on it, it's got values on it, we see
Hmm.
time after time, well, there's no exits. Like, you can't, well, how do you even value your company when there's no exits? Well, that's because people had a really they had a like a mirage of what agriculture may or may not be, and they saw, oh, it's dollar
Hmm.
signs, but it was never dollar signs. It was all about people. And I believe that the
Hmm.
companies that have taken on people investments, that, so I won't vilify anybody in venture capital, private equity, but I would say, if you
Hmm.
looked at the people over the products or even the problems, I think what you would find is the right amount of intention, and those are going to be the ones that win and survive over the next 12 months. There's going to be a lot of other things happen.
Hmm.
I'm not going to look in a crystal ball, Mark, and
Yep.
say it's going to be this way or that way, but it's a survival period.
Hmm.
And you and I both know tough,
Hmm.
intentional people are built to survive and built to be strategic visionaries, and are not going to want to get fat during this time, because this time is a very lean time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like your take on this is those with the right intentions come out on top of this.
Yeah, I pray they do, for agriculture in America's sake, because I,
Hmm.
I don't, I think it's not necessarily a negative thing, but I think people are so far removed from what this really looks like that they feel like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, we can neglect this, or we can let this be broken over here in this corner. We can just let that sit over there. We can let the food system kind of sit over there. And you mentioned the farm bill.
Yep.
Farm bill, there's been some language around
Hmm.
different things, but you have to ask yourself on the farm bill, you know, are we putting a band-aid on it, or are we really trying to fix things? Because a lot of times the
Right.
fix is so uncomfortable that it's easy for people that get elected by constituents to say no to everything, when
Hmm.
it's hard to say yes to things that may look very dramatic and that may actually get at a problem that needs fixing versus a band-aid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if it's coming out of Congress, then chances are it's just a band-aid, right? I mean, we're not we're not getting we're highly unlikely to get to the root of real issues, right? Now there is one interesting thing. I think this is super interesting. Would be interested in your take on it. I was looking at the Luna amendment. Okay. And I don't are you familiar with that at all in the farm bill?
Mark,
It just
yes,
came through the
yes,
House.
yes, I am.
Okay.
I am.
All right. So for the listeners, let's talk about this. Like, define it for us.
Well, there is there's a lot of there's a lot of back and forth between farmers, ag chem manufacturers, states are even involved in this, and it's related to legal
Mhm.
challenges of potential. I would call it exposure of different crop protection chemistries, and I say crop protection chemistries because that means that they are regulated by the EPA. That means that they undergo a significant amount of safety and toxicity work, or have at some point. My question really, this question brings up so many, you know, kind of auxiliary points about where we need to fix things. There's no doubt that,
Mhm.
there's rights that manufacturers and farmers have. There's rights that human health has. I think right now Luna's amendment is about the human health aspect. Do people have the right to litigate
Hmm.
these companies if they get sick? Well, what about the EPA? Well, I'm going to actually be a big advocate for the EPA in this conversation because I have met with the EPA, Mark. And what I will tell you about the EPA is
Yeah.
they want to do the best job for the American people. And that's important to know because when it comes to funding, when it comes to slashing budgets, when it comes to positions that are making sure the best, newest crop protection molecules and biopesticides get approved, we need a strong
Hmm.
EPA that has people that can review things and make sure that the innovation does not stagnate. And so to me, I look at
Yeah.
this conversation around Luna's amendment and around where we're heading with innovation one and one. Okay. Like, I'm not the right person to say
Hmm.
whether we should be able to sue a chemical manufacturer, but if I do want to safeguard
Right.
my food system, I look at, oh, okay, who are the regulating bodies and how are we treating them? And in my opinion, we've been
Yeah.
very unfair to the EPA. Administrator Zeldin has done an amazing job. His leadership have done an amazing job, and they have been tremendously shorthanded. And so I see, uh, I see
Hmm.
Administrator Zeldin in Georgia. I see him traveling all over, and I really think it's for people to know that he's not negative toward farmers. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. He wants farmers to have the best, newest things, but he actually has to safeguard what
Yeah.
his regulatory body is too, and make sure that they're well thought of.
Hmm.
Because that is kind of a shock when I walked into the EPA building the first time, and obviously I didn't know what I was going to get. I didn't know how I was going to be treated. I was there on behalf of a client.
Hmm.
But what I can tell you is I was
Hmm.
treated with an extreme amount of fairness, kindness, curiosity. And I can tell you, based on the questions they asked me, they want the best for the American farmer. So shout out to the EPA.
Hmm.
I'm not here to, you know, be a fan of Anna
Yeah.
Paulina Luna. I think she is serving her constituents well, and that's her primary focus. And so, there's a lot of
Hmm.
landmines, and you bringing that up, Mark. For me, I got a lot of
Yeah.
friends on both
Well,
sides,
you know what?
but it's good.
Well, and I think it's interesting. So to clarify, right? I mean, so the Luna Amendment would have put language into the Farm Bill. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm novice and I'm just reading what I read from the internet. And full disclosure, I don't watch the news. We don't even have cable. So the only thing I take in is what comes through my Facebook, my LinkedIn, and whatever I personally decide to go look up. This was of course, I'm interested in the Farm Bill, so I'm reading through. I'm like, oh, Luna Amendment. This is super interesting. And at first I read it like, oh, this is in. And I saw that the vote was 280 to 142. And then I read it again and realized I had it backwards, that the language actually got stripped. But it is interesting, right? It's in there. The conversation is front and center. There is a mistrust at some level, and I live with it even within my own household. We live on a golf course, and the golf course was spraying probably 2,4-D within 10 yards of our back fence where I have crops growing, or my garden growing back there. And my mother-in-law who lives with us was losing her shit. Right, because she's Italian and she grew up in Italy. There's a very different growing way of growing things over there for the most part, and people have a different food experience in Italy that we also need to pay attention to. I know I did when I went and lived there for a short amount of time. So anyway, that was we've got that going on here, and then we've got the other reality, which by the way, RFK did acknowledge that we can't just go from the pendulum where it is all the way to the other side. We'll go hungry. There will be famine. And he actually made a very eloquent Instagram post about that, which I thought was very good on his part. That and just speaking to the Maha people, hey, we can't just strip all of this all at once. It won't work. We need to be investing in and incentivizing people to look for new um, new ways of growing ways to be even more sustainable, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the things that's cool about what you do, Michael, is that you're in that space. Like you're in the innovative space. You're helping ag tech firms. You're helping biological firms that are getting started, like find their footing, find their commercialization, get the foothold in the market. So talk to me a little bit about what are you seeing in that arena. What's are there any interesting new innovations, or is it all, do we just need better fungi in the soil?
No, there's some really good innovations out there, Mark, that are getting commercially picked up, that are getting adopted, that are getting promoted at the highest levels of our distribution conversation in the US. And that is exciting. For me, I cannot be, pro one thing and against one other thing. I cannot discriminate between a bacillus and a pseudomonas strain that both do interesting, cool things and are getting really looked at and favorably viewed by farmers. Because at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking about a resilient food system, and the only way to do that is look for new tools that support farm profitability, that battle things like resistant fusarium, maybe corn rootworm. Everybody needs new tools. Maybe you have an organic grower, and the way they say, hey, the only way I'm gonna survive this really low commodity situation is for me to think about growing non-traded or organic, potentially corn. If I have the available land to do that, that I can work straight into it, or non-traded corn that, okay, so all of a sudden I'm thinking about different herbicide, post application
Mm-hmm.
chemistry, and my strategy has to change. And so there's a lot of thoughts around how do I do things better, and a lot of times that does intersect with the biological conversation because there's no doubt things are changing, and we look at nature's way versus our way. We look at biology versus chemistry. And I am very confident that these things can work together to ultimately be the best profitable roadmap for a farmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. I think it's super interesting. It's a really, really interesting time between pressure and we've had a lot of special interest groups lately, just kind of sprinkled in with our guests on the show. We've had Corey Rosenbush with the Fertilizer Institute. We've had a couple folks from the Meat Institute on. We've had, well, we've had a bunch. We had Corey with Midwest Dairy, right? So we're kind of getting a little bit more intel in the show about like what's going on in DC, what's going on in policy, and so I'm just this undertone has been there for a long time, and of course we've got Maha has become a big thing. RFK's in there. We're making America healthy again, which I do think is actually a really good thing. We should want that, right? Another thing this came up on the show, we the use of GLP-1s. Okay, which by the way, like I'm not a massive big fan of taking a drug to to lose weight, but if that's the only thing that's going to work for you and that's the only thing you can pull off, I guess I would rather have you be healthy and on a drug than not healthy and dying young. So I'll take it. But what I didn't realize is how much that's impacting the meat industry and driving up demand for protein. And so, I mean, the cost of steaks are already high. We make decent money around here. My wife and I had a decision. We're like, we got to take steaks down to once a month,
That's right.
or eat it. Let me reframe that. We got to take ribeyes down to once a month. We got to go to some cheaper cuts of meat when we go back to the butcher shop. You know what I'm saying? Because we got 8 people in here to feed every night. Like that's a lot of meat every time you're putting something on the table. So anyway, we look at that. I want to bring. I'm saying all this to bring it to kind of a point. There's a really interesting conversation. I think we're having a lot of those conversations on this podcast. I say it in some way, shape, or form about the end of every show. I think we need to reestablish a new North Star for agriculture. So, you and I have talked a little bit here in the last 15 minutes about biologicals, what's in the farm bill, what is some of the conversation, how does the EPA support this, not support this, et cetera. That's the conversations that we're having. But Like what for from your perspective as you think about the legacy that you want to leave for your kids. You're a young dad. You know, you've got a few kids coming up and living in the world. What's the North Star, you know, for the future in your opinion?
Hmm. Well, we're going to try to hit like a massive mashup of different topics in this North Star conversation. I think where agriculture is
Mm-hmm.
going, we are concerned about adoption at no we to a reckless point, and the USDA awarding Palantir, which is an AI NVIDIA type company, which is a technology company, a non compete contract, basically, that they said, hey, we want farmers to be underneath this blanket offering where we can have them at a one-stop shop of what they're doing, how that's integrated with USDA farm payments, how that's integrated with certain conservation programs, and probably beyond. And so, there's a lot of eyes open to that, because if you were worried about seed companies sharing your data, or maybe John Deere sharing your data, what happens when the USDA shares your data? Okay. Or what happens when they have the a la carte of your data in your programs? And so there's going to be a new level of accountability at the farm level. There's going to be things that we might have to understand better. And what I would say to someone like Palantir, if I had the opportunity to, is, hey, do you know about agriculture? Not just what you can read, but if you step on a farm, the things that you talk to people for decades, what have you ever done that? Do you have anyone on your team that could do that? Or do you have people that their future really depends on farming, really farming and producing food? And my hope is that Palantir, in their amazing wisdom, they will reach out to folks that are on the ground trying to help growers execute conservation programs, execute crop systems that are failing right now economically because of different factors, to help them get over the hump on this. Because this is going to be everyone in the same boat. And we need to be working together on this. And I'm excited that a company like
Mm-hmm.
Palantir would want to work with USDA. I'm excited about that, Mark. Don't let me say that. I mean, this is not me vilifying a company
Mm-hmm.
that's like Palantir. What I'm trying to tell Palantir is this moment in agriculture in the US is critical. We are moving things, we are
Mm-hmm.
changing things. Maha is playing into this. AI is playing into this. GLP-1s are playing into this. Local proteins are playing into this. This is a critical moment. And so I would hope that Palantir would be looking in directions of saying, oh, yeah, Sentinel Ag is my nitrogen management tool. That, oh, Jack Stansel, he's amazing. Yes, we want him. He is this person, this expert on this. Earlier in this consulting kind of conversation I had with you, I told you I was not an expert on any one thing. And that makes me really thankful, because I want to find the experts. And I would hope Palantir would have the same lens. Oh, aggregating farm data. Oh, yes, culture. Ooh, I want farm data entry points about what I'm doing on a day to day basis. Yes, I need to talk to Numinac or someone in this kind of AI
Yeah.
prescriptive, transcriptive moment. Ooh, I need to make sure payments get done right, because I've never had to understand USDA payment systems. Ooh, I want to get with Pinion out in California. They have a great program. They're already working with USDA. So my hope is that technology would crash course with people, embodied people, Mark, people that care and are intentional about the future of American agriculture. And my prayer is that my children find their livelihoods somewhere within that crash course. Maybe it's not on the ag side, maybe it's more on the tech side or the engineering side, or maybe it's the computing side, or maybe it's on diplomacy. There's a tremendous opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for diplomacy, and USDA and Secretary Lindbergh, They've done fantastic. I just want to say this out loud. The USDA is made up of amazing people. Uh, Undersecretary
Mhm.
Fordyce, Secretary Rollins, they're all working hard, but there's a lot of other interest parties. You mentioned TFI. My last shout out goes to the Fertilizer Institute. There's no more crunched, vilified industry right now, really, than the fertilizer industry, and they're
Yeah,
doing a really
battle.
amazing job battling this conversation and trying to get the best for American farmers while also making sure that our fertilizer supply is where it needs to be. Because once again, it goes to the
Mhm.
Maha. You're not just going to turn it off and not going to grow corn without fertilizer tomorrow, Mark. And so, what I
Yeah,
would say furthermore is the biostimulant industry. Uh, Corey Rosenbush, his actions have supported biostimulant industry. The vice president, Ed Thomas, he's been terrific at TFI. Dr. Leanna Nigon. I mean, they've all been so wonderful for pushing this really science focused, innovative conversation for farmers,
yeah.
for distributors, and a huge credit goes to TFI. So that's all I got to say about that.
So yeah, hats off to Corey and the team over there at TFI for sure. Nobody, I mean, I've talked to Corey, I've had Corey on the show. Like, I do not envy the position that he is in, trying to keep this whole thing together when the world is, on the at war, on the brink of a larger war. I mean, just so much uncertainty in the market right now, right? And so he is he is handling. He is the right person for the job. Let's just say that, to be in that position at this time, along with the team that he's got over there at TFI. So definitely great for them. I just I want to close it out with this, and agree or disagree, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned a real big mashup of a lot of things, like you said you were gonna, and in a world where we're moving away from globalization, we're going America first policy. So I think this is that agriculture doesn't really work that way. Like, we're never not going to be impacted globally. Things move, right? Whether it's commodities going in and out, trade is obviously very important to keeping farmers going, to giving them a market within which to sell their products. Even things like sorghum, we could use a lot more of it here. We could improve domestic policy, but you know what? The Chinese need to make hooch. So there's an international market for things like sorghum, and people will place their money and their time where their priorities truly are. This is a time when we need some leadership to step up and say and establish what is the North Star for our generation coming up. When you and I were kids, it was feed the world. We're feeding the world. Now it's time for to figure out, okay, what is that for the next 25 years, right? What is that for the next 25 years? That's my opinion. That's my take. I don't know that we've got the language around this yet, but I do think it's important because of all the noise, because of all the uncertainty, because of all the volatility, and because we need to recruit another generation of young people to come and take up the torch and be involved and be engaged and take this over when you and I are done, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. Critical.
So there you have it. Mhm. Michael, it's great to have you on the show again. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for making it a long one today, so that people can chew on this and listen to it. And I hope that they do. If we need to reach out to Poma Ag for our next upstart biological product commercialization feature within our business, how do we get hold of you?
Michael at poma.ag, Mark. And definitely
That's
uh, really thankful for you putting that in the show notes. Let folks know that we're here to help. Like I'm not going to charge you by the hour, even though we did have a self-worth, self-value conversation. Happy to tell people,
there you go.
as honestly as I can what they need from a gut feeling. So thank you for everything that you're doing,
Yeah.
Mark, to get our communication up there, and really grateful for your leadership.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being on.
It's my pleasure. Let's do it again.